Story 1. I did not understand that there was a cargo hold on airplanes, so I thought when the airport worker takes your bags and puts them on the conveyor belt, they enter a vast underground tunnel system connecting all the country's airports. Presumably, the bags would also be traveling underground at hundreds of miles per hour to reach the destination airport on time. Then, when you go to baggage claim, your luggage is finally exiting the tunnel system. Story 2. If I practiced very hard every day, I would eventually be able to turn my head all the way around like an owl. I now have to see a physiotherapist regularly. Story 3. That shark came out of the pool lights in the deep end of the swimming pool. It made me a fast swimmer, though. Story 4. In kindergarten, when I did not yet know that dying of old age or natural reasons is a reality, I thought that old people eventually reach a point where they become younger again and the cycle repeats. Hence, there is a lack of very old people. Story 5. I don't know how I came to this conclusion, but for some reason, I believed that there were people who would press a button to display their commercial on the television. I imagined a room full of representatives from various companies watching the television and waiting for the perfect moment to press their button to show their commercial, as if it were a competition. Story 6. I always contemplated either wetting my pants or being harmed by Jeff the Killer and Freddy Fazbear on my way to the bathroom at night. I wet myself a lot, let's say. Story 7. I felt self-conscious changing my clothes in front of the posters of New Kids on the Block on my bedroom wall, so I would change in the closet or hallway. Story 8. Losing adult teeth would not make you elderly overnight. I misunderstood my mother when she said you do not lose adult teeth until you are old. Story 9. That black and white movies or shows were actually just what they were wearing, black, grays, and dull colors. I did not know there were actually no colors. Story 10. That tiger dogs were roaming our living room. My convincingly evil older sister was leaving claw marks on our carpet. Story 11. My mother told me that spiders do not like beds to help me go to sleep once. I was terrified of the spider lurking in the corner of the room. Can you imagine how shocked I was at 21 when I discovered a spider under my pillow? Story 12. Alligators lived in the sewers under New York City and would snatch children who walked over a sewer grate. I had relatives in New York City, and whenever we visited, I walked around every sewer grate we encountered. Story 13. I was always convinced that someone was in my room as a child. Every time I entered, I felt someone was already standing there. When I was inside, I believed I was being watched. It reached a point where I was afraid to be in my room, especially at night. As an adult, after several encounters with ghosts over the years, I discovered that I have a mild sensitivity to spirits. Story 14. There is a person watching you through a camera in toilets that automatically flush. He presses the button to flush when you stop or get up. Story 15. I could hear it getting dark outside. When I was a kid in the early 1980s, all the neighborhood children would do kid stuff together after school. I always knew when it was time to head home by the blasting sounds in the sky. It happened every day. I never even thought about it until I moved out of state in 5th grade. That is when I noticed you could not hear it getting dark outside and mentioned it to my parents. They were understandably very confused until my dad remembered that there was a skeet shooting range across some cow pastures from our neighborhood. It opened at 6 p.m. The blasts I heard were shotguns. Yes, I grew up in Texas. Story 16. As soon as you got married, the bride would leave the church, and an ambulance would be waiting to take her to the hospital to have her baby. I have no idea where I got this idea from. This was the 1970s. I did not know of any forced marriages. The only reason I was corrected about this belief was because of a drawing I did. It included a church, bride, groom, guests, and an ambulance. My mother asked about it, and I told her. Story 17. My dad told my brother and me that when a dentist cleans your teeth, they get pulled out and cleaned in something like a dishwasher and then put back in. My brother and I were terrified for a week. Story 18. Reindeer are mythical creatures. A few years ago, I saw an advertisement for a reindeer farm and thought it was nonsense because they are not real. Flying reindeer are not real. I told my husband and he got a good laugh. Thankfully, he does not give me a hard time about it. Story 19. After watching a few episodes of Herman's Head and being a child with an overactive imagination, I believed that those people were living in my head. I told my fourth grade counselor about the people in my head, and it went as poorly as you might expect. Story 20. I did not believe this for long, but when I was really young, I thought only black people were allowed to play basketball. I think I had just learned about racism and thought it went both ways. Story 21. There are some movies where a character is a child at the beginning and becomes an adult by the end of the movie. Instead of casting one child and one adult to play the same character at different ages, I thought they used a single actor. I believe they cast the actor as a child and waited for them to grow up to film the rest of the movie. Story 22. My mother had 6 children in 10 years, so I grew up thinking that pregnancy was like a bowel movement. You filled up, had a baby, and filled up again. Story 23. When I was in 3rd grade, a kid convinced me that Justin Timberlake was his cousin, even though they look nothing alike. Story 24. My grandmother sent bamboo to pandas in China. This was not a widely discussed belief. My aunts probably said this once to quiet us as kids. One day in college, I was walking with my friends and passed some bamboo. I started telling a story about how my grandmother had some bamboo where we played, but they chopped it down and sent it to China. My friends stopped and stared at me, and at that moment, I realized what a crazy idea I had kept in my head for over 10 years. Later, I mentioned the bamboo to my cousin, and she said, "Yes, they sent it to China." She is now a tenured professor at a prestigious university. This shows how impressionable children can be. Story 25. That extraterrestrial was going to come into my room at night and tickle my feet. This was a serious problem for me back then. Story 26. When I was very young, I thought that cartoon characters were real actors dressed in well-made costumes, and it amazed me. Story 27. I used to believe that all the different words for sexual activity referred to different types rather than all being the same general concept. Story 28. Bombs were randomly dropped anywhere at any time, so I had to be on full alert just in case. I am from the United States in a rural area, so I always wondered where I got this idea. Story 29. A hernia is a tear in the intestines above the scrotum. This can cause fecal matter to drain into the scrotum. You would no longer have normal bowel movements and would need to have the scrotum drained by a doctor on a weekly basis. Story 30. I used to think the thing that made crunchy peanut butter crunchy was the manufacturer deliberately adding shells to the mix. This is why I never understood why people said they liked it. Story 31. When I was in middle school, I thought Tony Hawk was just a mascot character like Ronald McDonald created by Activision to advertise the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater video games, and that all of his appearances at sports shows and similar events were just paid actors. Story 32. My brothers told me that if I did not chew the calamari well enough, it would crawl out of my nose later. I did not eat it for years because of that. Story 33. There was only one disc jockey on the radio. It took Radio Luxembourg to make me realize otherwise. Also, because all the historic films on television were American, I thought all people prior to the 20th century spoke like Americans. My adoptive brother was a teenager before he found out Genghis Khan was not a Scottish poet. And no, not even he knows why he thought he was. Story 34. I believed that all children were born boys. We all did. If a boy was bad or played with themselves too much, they turned into a girl. By some strange logic, a girl, thought I would suddenly be a boy again when I was 5. I spent one day at the park with my family asking strangers if they had seen my sister after watching my mother take care of her needs. Story 35. I used to sincerely believe until this year that you would get a stomachache if you ate ice cream before eating warm food. My mother told me this when I was a child, and I took it at face value for more than 20 years until this year when I was shopping with my mother, and we talked about getting ice cream. That is when the truth was revealed to me. Story 36. I thought that I could become a girl and be happy if I prayed to God, while not believing in it. It was kind of like, well, let's give him a chance to exist. Obviously, it did not, but that's how desperate I was. And I still am, somehow. Story 37. That burrs were small animals that grabbed you with their claws. This is what my brother told me. He would chase me with them until I finally stood still and realized they were plants. Story 38. I used to think when I was a child that I gave up my childhood name and received a new name as an adult. I have no idea where that thought came from. Story 39. I sincerely believed your babies would be bald if you did not rub chests while doing it. I really judged a lot of adults with bald babies until someone set me straight. How did they know to do that? I saw a bald baby and thought, ugh, I totally know what that mom is into. My friend questioned my comment and provided much-needed sexual education. Story 40. I thought every woman automatically became pregnant if she did not take birth control. I believed that every woman just started growing a child in her stomach. Story 41. As a child, I truly believed money grew on trees because my older brother, home from boarding school with coins, swore he picked them from a money tree. Story 42. My dad used to tell me about a made-up creature called wolf turkeys. He talked about them so much that I thought they were real until I was 8. He only stopped talking about them last year. Story 43. Hamsters lived for about 10 years. Every time one of mine passed away, my mom would replace it with the same color that looked as close as possible to my old one. Story 44. If I did things a certain way, I could influence things that were truly outside of my control. One obsessive-compulsive disorder diagnosis later, life makes sense. Story 45. The tooth fairy uses my teeth to build houses and uses plaque or gunk as cement. I am pretty sure my dad, who is a builder, told me that. Story 46. Flushing the unused water from a toilet bowl provides the fish in the sewers some relief from all the urine and feces they have to endure. Story 47. My parents told me that I should never let anyone touch my penis unless it was my doctor. As an adult, I understand they were trying to warn me about stranger danger and sexual assault. But as a child, it made me terrified that my doctor would touch my penis whenever I got sick. I would also like to add that my child currently lives in fear of any group of trees she cannot see through because she believes bears live in the forest. Story 48. My mother told me once that if I stepped on a shard of glass, it would travel through my veins and pierce my heart. I was terrified of this for years. Story 49. Dad told us during the 1970s Olympics that Ethiopians were such good runners because lions chased them on their way to school. As an Australian child, this made total sense because we avoided snakes and big spider webs on our way to school. As a family, we still cheer for Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Uganda in middle distance running. It's the lions. Story 50. I never believed in the tooth fairy, Santa Claus, or any other magical beings kids usually believe in. But the Finnish sauna elf, oh boy, I was certain there was a little gnome or elf living in the sauna, helping it warm up. When the wood crackled in the sauna stove, my dad always said it was the sauna elf making popcorn, and I was so jealous of that little guy. Story 51. I was only a child, so I wasn't seeing the whole picture. It seemed like all the things I had watched were in dark settings. Story 52. I thought stores paid you to shop there. I did not really understand the concept of change. I also thought that any restaurant that let you eat before paying was fancy. Story 53. Before I had glasses, I had a bunch of weird theories about things I could not see, like why my mother could tell when a car was turning but I could not. Also, credit cards, I thought they were magic-free money because I never saw the paying it off part. I asked for a Visa card for my birthday many times. Story 54. For the record, I was very young, but I believe dogs were males and cats were females, and they would have babies together. Story 55. If someone used the bathroom and flushed while you were in the shower, the toilet water could come through the shower head. Story 56. Those giant swiveling lights that send columns of light into the night sky and advertise furniture sales were actually used to indicate a missing or kidnapped child. Like a bat signal, but for the public to be on the lookout. Story 57. The actors in Chinese dramas can really climb up trees and other objects. Japanese people can speak English like ventriloquists because their mouths move differently than the words coming out of them. Story 58. Que no hacía popó y que toda la comida se quedaba en mi estómago. Entonces me acordaba de una comida rica que había comido hace meses o un año. Yo qué sé, y me imaginaba que todavía estaba ahí en mi estómago. Me gustaba imaginar que acumulaba comida como trofeos. Story 59. that cows were mythic creatures. Hear me out. I lived primarily in the middle of Los Angeles in California and had never seen a cow in person. Every cow I had seen was in a book or in an advertisement and they talked. So clearly that couldn't be a real animal. My brain was blown when I saw a cow for the first time. I was 7. Now I live in the countryside in the Midwest and see cows nearly every day. Story 60. Cats and dogs are not the same species. Cats are felines and dogs are canines. When you walk, you do not actually move anywhere. You push the earth to rotate slightly with your feet, similar to a treadmill. Story 61. I believed that all cats were female and all dogs were male. I recall becoming very upset when my parents explained that this was not true. Story 62. I believed that the bags under people's eyes were implants placed on purpose to look more serious and respectable. My reasoning was that every time I saw someone with bags under their eyes on the news, they were discussing important topics like politics or the economy. Story 63. Raspberries and blackberries are the same fruit at different stages of growth and ripeness. I did not realize we had a raspberry plant wrapped in brambles. Story 64. My grandmother used to tell me crabs were in the bathtub drains and would pinch my fingers if I stuck my fingers in the drain. I do not know where it came from, but I did not dig around in the drains at 5 or 6 years old. Story 65. The belief that poinsettias are deadly poison and that just touching them could cause death is false. I went to a greenhouse with my mother at Christmas time, which was full of poinsettias. I tried hard not to touch any, but I accidentally brushed against one. Later that day, my mother asked why I was so upset and nearly in tears. When I told her, she showed no sympathy and said, "If they were that poisonous, do you really think people would have them in their homes?" Story 66. I thought that people could die if they drank Coca-Cola and ate those crackle dust sweets at the same time. Story 67. I genuinely thought everything was black and white in the 1950s and orangish in the 1970s. I did not believe my father at first when he told me real life was just as colorful back then as it is now. Story 68. I thought actors in action movies were actually dying when they were killed for our entertainment. My older sister explained that they were all death row inmates who got to choose between regular execution or dying in a movie to leave $100,000 to their family. I believed it until I was 9, when I saw The Matrix with her and her boyfriend. I was very upset about all the people dying. Story 69. That my wardrobe came alive at night, tried to trap me inside, and eat me. I was genuinely terrified. Story 70. In Brazil, most kindergartens call their teachers tia, which can be translated to aunt. This does not mean they are our aunts. It is just easier than saying professora, which means teacher. I believe their actual name was tia, and never thought about the possibility that they had names like us. I was shocked when I learned they had names and that I had to call them teacher at some point in my life. Story 71. That if you left your window open at night, bats would fly in and take you away. My grandmother told me this, and I had nightmares about it for months. Story 72. The internet was still in its early stages when I was a young child. I thought when you bought something online, it came out of your personal computer somehow. For example, if you ordered flowers, they would be sent through the floppy disk drive or printer. Story 73. When I was about 3 to 4 years old, I was influenced by my dad, who I watched Star Wars with, and my religious mom, who wanted me to learn about God. So naturally, seeing Yoda's powers, I honestly thought Yoda was God for a good while. Story 74. I was told that green stool meant you were low on iron. It was so plausible that I believed it into my 30s. Story 75. When I was very young, my grandmother still had a black and white television. I remember asking my mother when the world changed to color because I thought my grandmother's television showed the actual color of the world at that time. Story 76. All cats were female and all dogs were male. I have no idea why I believed this. This was early elementary school age. Story 77. Automated teller machines literally just give you money. Need money? Head to a cash machine and withdraw some. No strings attached. Story 78. I thought count, like the noble title, was just another word for vampire, so I did not think counts actually existed. Story 79. My mother said that she needs to buy, pack, and send my gift to Santa so he can place it under the Christmas pine tree on Christmas night. Story 80. Eating the crust of bread would make my hair curly. More fun ones though. My mum was Cheryl Baker from Bucks Fizz. I saw them on top of the pops and said to my mum, "That looks like you." She said it was. Then she tried to convince my nan to say the same when I asked her. My mum also convinced me her best friend's name was Rupert because she called him Rue. His name is Andrew. I was in my 20s when I found out it wasn't. I guess they're not too weird. But what the heck? There's another one too, the same Rue. She said he was best friends with Robbie Williams. Obviously, that wasn't true, but 20 years later my mum got engaged to Robbie Williams' cousin. Story 81. Pregnant women's belly buttons are like a doorknob to open the special door through which the baby comes out. Story 82. I remember being told that you could get worms, and at night they came out of your anus, so to get rid of them you had to put a sticking plaster over your anus at night to catch them. I was concerned about it for a while. The strange thing is that it was my mum who told 5-year-old me about it. I think she was joking. I am nearly 40 now. Story 83. I grew up as an only child, and my parents divorced when I was just months old. Until I was embarrassingly old, I thought you could only have kids with the person you married, which is why I didn't have siblings since my parents divorced right after I was born. It wasn't until around 4th grade that I met my first half-siblings, and it literally blew my mind. I thought, what do you mean your dad isn't your sister's dad? And her dad isn't the other sister's dad either? I never realized it was just a choice for me to be an only child. Everyone I knew who were only children like me had parents who were separated, and all the siblings I knew, even if separated, shared the same 2 parents, so it never registered. Story 84. My neighbors had an unmaintained pool with green, murky water, and I was afraid of creatures living in it. I used to have nightmares about it. Story 85. When I was a child, I was scared of getting older because I thought I would magically become pregnant. It scared me and caused me a lot of anxiety for a brief period of time. Story 86. If you put your finger in the knothole in the wooden ceiling of the breezeway at grandmother's house, you would go back in time. I swear my youngest aunt told me that when I was about 5, but she never remembered telling me that. Or that Pennsylvania was full of vampires. Story 87. I invented the toenail fairy after my toenails fell off due to hand, foot, and mouth disease when I was 6 or 7 years old. It had the same principle as the tooth fairy. I also convinced myself that I was adopted after seeing the house note and noticing the last name did not match mine. I was not adopted. I was just a happy little accident. Story 88. I believe that when I had a cold, there were tiny elves up my nose boiling mucus in a big pot and pouring it down my nose. I do not know why. Story 89. That cartoon TV worlds were on different planets and they were recorded. I thought Rugrats took place somewhere else, and I thought SpongeBob lived somewhere in the sea. Story 90. I believed it was possible for me to explode. When I was 6, my mom, due to mental health and childhood trauma issues, severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, and serious paranoia as a result of end times famine and nuclear war being preached by the church she belonged to, had what I assumed was a mental breakdown when she could no longer deal with my being a severely underweight 6-year-old boy, which was very apparent to her because I preferred to be nude at home. She virtually force-fed me by obtaining appetite stimulants that were not prescribed or dosed for me, and I developed an insatiable appetite that my mom took full advantage of. So I went from 45 pounds to 250 pounds by my 8th birthday. The quantities of food that I was given resulted in my belly becoming extremely distended, and the only way to be able to take even small, shallow breaths was to lie on my side on the couch or floor. I did not understand how digestion worked at that age. I really thought that you ate food and it just stayed in your belly, and as a result, mine was getting massive. I saw a cartoon by Merry Melodies from 1937 called Pigs is Pigs, in which the main character is a young pig, without clothes just like me, with extreme gluttony. He dreams one night of being enticed into a mad scientist's place and is strapped into a feeding chair where various contraptions force-feed him until he is finally released. As he waddles out the door, he sees the table of food that he was baited with, eats a turkey leg, and explodes. I was certain that at some point my mom was going to make me eat 1 or 2 more plates of dinner than the usual 5, and I was going to explode too. Story 91. I thought small people lived inside traffic lights and were responsible for lighting the green, yellow, and red lights. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.